Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my NFL draft grades for every single team. Today, we're literally going to rank them A, B, C, D. That's what we're doing in today's video. Of course, if you guys are new to the channel, be sure to like, subscribe, turn that bell on as we do our best to post on the channel every single day. Voice is back, better than yesterday at least, so that's a good sign. Let's go ahead and hop into it, though, as we got a couple things to talk about really quickly. Number one, season-ending game for the New Orleans Pelicans last night. Yes, we lost to the Oklahoma City Thunder and got swept in that series, but we should be back next year. Hopefully, Zion is healthy next year. Also, the Bucks are playing tonight. If you guys cannot tell, the Milwaukee Bucks are taking on the Indiana Pacers with it down 3-1. Hopefully, Dame and Giannis, they're not playing, but hopefully Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, and the other guys with Doc Rivers can get it done on the hardware tonight. Also, really quickly, one shout out locally to a game that is happening. It is the Spanish Four Toros playoff soccer game, rather. I know we don't really talk about high school soccer, but I want to get that out there. I'm going to that game tonight. It's going to be a fun one. Taking on Robertsdale, obviously. Spanish Fort's got some good soccer commits that are going to the up next level, like Jacob Anderson, Ethan Spieler probably. A couple of those guys are definitely going to go up another level. Kuhn is also going to go, a couple of my friends as well. So I will be attending that game. Spanish Fort taking on Robertsdale at Integrity Park at 7 o'clock tonight as well. But regardless, let's go ahead and hop in to grading every team's NFL draft, as we got a lot to talk about on the channel. Alright everybody, here we are with the tier list, plain and simple. We got the teams at the top that had a great draft. They drafted who they needed to get back into winning. Then we have the pretty good but also kind of average draft, obviously. That means you got an okay draft, but there's still definitely room to work with as well. And then finally, last but not least, we have terrible, and definitely have some major questions about their draft. So, we'll start us off with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm going to go ahead and say a pretty good but kind of average draft. Again, I didn't really pay attention to who they drafted. I believe they drafted a wide receiver or somebody in that draft, but I do want to say that was a good pickup for them if they did, because Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are getting kind of old. So somebody hopefully could take the helm there for them as well. Moving on. Excuse that logo. I did not even see this before the draft, or before I did this tier list. But you got the Washington Commanders, and I'm going to put them in a great draft. They got what they needed to in Jaden Daniels. Obviously, they have their quarterback of the future, so that is very talented quarterback and very good for them as well. Moving on, you got the Houston Texans. I didn't really pay attention to their draft either, so I'm going to put them at pretty good, kind of average. A lot of these teams I didn't really keep up with a lot, but I will still definitely try my best to grade their draft as well. Ravens, moving on. I'm going to give them a great draft. I believe they got some help on the offensive lineman side of things. I also believe they got a little defensive help as well. With that said, they had one of the better drafts of these teams, so that's why I'm going to go with that one for the Baltimore Ravens. Now, moving on is the Dallas Cowboys. They did pretty good, but kind of average in my opinion. Hear me out. Yeah, if you guys watched yesterday's draft grade for the Dallas Cowboys, you would understand my reasoning behind this. But we pretty much doubled up on offensive linemen. That's what we needed to do. It's what Jerry Jones needed to do, especially like the loss of Tyron Smith. Obviously, Zach Martin gone as well, I believe, is going to be a huge problem for our offensive linemen. But we did go out there and get a guard, an offensive lineman, and a couple other linemen as well. We also got an edge rusher, but we got cornerbacks. I don't think we needed depth on the cornerback position, but overall, they did pretty good as well. Moving on, you got the Jets. They're pretty good, but kind of average as well. Trading down, again, trading out of the top 10, not getting what they really needed in Brock Bowers, which should have been a top 10 overall pick. That is very, I don't know. It was alright, but other than that, they did certainly fine. Now moving on is the Raiders, and I have some major questions about them. Number one, why did they trade up for, obviously, a top 10 pick to draft Brock Bowers when you have Devontae Adams? That did not make sense to me at all. I do not understand why they did that, but that is why I have some major questions going into that one. Moving on, though, you got the Carolina Panthers. They get a great draft for me. I graded them about a B or B plus yesterday in my draft grade. We got Xavier Legette. We got Jonathan Brooks. Jatavion Sanders is also going to be a huge help at that tight end position for Bryce Young as well. So we got some dogs. Let's see if we can put him on the field for this year as well. It's great for Bryce. He has weapons. Now it's all on Dan Morgan and Dave Canales to coach him better as well. Now moving on, you got the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, didn't really know a whole lot about them, but I'm going to put them at a great draft. They had a pretty good one, at least from what I've heard from my friends. My friends was very happy about it. A couple of my Eagles friends, I don't know why I'm saying like wiggle or something, but I'm putting them at great draft just from what I've heard from Eagles fans as well. Now, moving on, you got the Atlanta Falcons, and I'm putting them at terrible and have some major questions about. Number one, why would you draft Michael Penix Jr. in the first round? I was watching that at work, trying to at least keeping up with it. When I heard that pick called, my eyes opened wide. A couple people asked me, wow, what the heck was that? But again, I do not understand why you go with a quarterback when you just paid Kirk Cousins $100 million guaranteed for his first couple of years in Atlanta. And by the time Michael Penix is on his 5th-year contract, so will Kirk Cousins. So I don't know what they were thinking in drafting that, but overall they did terrible. We'll just call it at that. Now, moving on is the Chargers. I'm putting them at terrible and had some major questions about. Number one, Malik Neighbors still on the board at y'all's pick with number 5. I believe that was insane. Why wouldn't you go wide receiver there, especially when you lost 2 of your biggest wide receivers from this past year? But with that being said, the Chargers, they went offensive lineman. I don't know why. I mean, maybe just to shift their focus on to Justin Herbert. But again, that's just me. Terrible, and definitely have some major questions on as well. Moving on, you got the Dolphins. I'm going to give them a great draft. They drafted an edge rusher, which they needed to address. They drafted a couple offensive linemen, which they also needed to address as well. So they did get a pretty good draft grade as well. Now, moving on is the Green Bay Packers. I'm going to put them at pretty good, but kind of average as well. The Cleveland Browns, I have some questions about their draft. Again, I don't really know what they were doing, but overall, I think it was a pretty bad draft in my opinion. Now moving on is the Patriots, and they get a great draft. They drafted Drake May, a couple offensive linemen. I believe they drafted a wide receiver or 2 as well. So overall, round-wise, they definitely get a great draft as well. Moving on is the Detroit Lions. They get a great draft as well. They focus heavily on the defensive side of things. Trading up with the Dallas Cowboys was a great start to that. And then drafting a couple of corners in that draft is definitely what they needed to do. So great job there with the Detroit Lions. Now you got the Tennessee Titans, and I'm going to put them at pretty good, kind of average, just because they did not get Joe Alt, but they did draft J.C. Latham out of Alabama. That helps their offensive line, addresses a major needy position. So good job with the Tennessee Titans. Moving on, the New York Giants, they get a pretty good draft as well. They drafted a wide receiver, which is what they needed in the first round, so good for them as well. Moving on is the Denver Broncos. I have some questions about that. Number one, my main question being, why would you draft Bo Nix that high? He's not the best all-around guy. I think he would be available later on in the draft had you not draft him that high as well. Maybe use that pick on Brock Bowers or somebody because he was still available at the time. So with that said, the Broncos, why? I have some questions about that one as well. Moving on is the Minnesota Vikings. This one's not necessarily terrible because they did draft a quarterback, but I do have some major questions. My main question being, why would you take J.J. McCarthy that high? Honestly, they could have traded down if they wanted to get J.J. McCarthy and then go from there. He probably would have been available had they traded a few picks down, and they definitely could have gotten some more draft capital as well. Moving on is the San Francisco 49ers. I have some questions on them, especially regarding their first round pick, Ricky Parcell. Now, don't get me wrong. One of my friends is very high on Ricky Parcell, but he did not have a 1,000-yard season at all with that team. So with that said, that is why they have a terrible, and why would they do that draft kind of thing as well. Moving on, you got the Rams. I'm going to go with pretty good, kind of average. They did what they needed to do. They got some playmakers. Great on them as well. Moving on, though, you got the Seahawks. Great draft for them. Congratulations to DJ James, Nehemiah Pritchett, I believe, as well. And, of course, Derek Carr, all going there, drafting pretty much Auburn players throughout the years. Great to see that. Cannot wait to see them on the field. A couple Spanish Fort alumni as well. So great job with that one, with DJ James going to the Seattle Seahawks and Chris Abrams-Draine going to the Denver Broncos as well. Now, moving on is the Buffalo Bills. They did pretty average, pretty good, but kind of average. They traded back 2 spots, especially from their 32nd pick. Kind of traded up with Carolina where they got the next pick, drafted a receiver for them. So good on them for that. That's why I'm giving them a pretty good but kind of average draft. Same thing with the Jacksonville Jaguars, in my opinion. Good on them as well. Now it's all about T-Law and Travis Etienne and see how they can put it together, especially with their 5th-year option. Moving on is the Chicago Bears. Great draft on them. They got who they needed to. Rome Odunze is a great player. Caleb Williams, obviously going number 1 overall. Didn't sugarcoat it. Got what they needed to with their first top 10 picks. 2 top 10 picks this past year. So good on them. They had a great draft as well. Moving on is the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going to put them at pretty good, kind of average, just because I don't know too much about them. But the next one is the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm going to put them at a great draft. Number 1, you draft Jermaine Burton to come in, and that tells me that they're definitely going to trade away T. Higgins within these next coming days. Drafting another wide receiver, you got help on the offensive line side of things for Joe Burrow, so good on them for having a great draft as well. Moving on, Kansas City, they shocked everybody. I was flawed when they drafted Xavier Worthy. I was surprised when he dropped that far. So good on them for picking him up and getting another weapon for Patrick Mahomes. Another Tyreek Hill type weapon for Patrick Mahomes as well. Now, moving on is the Cardinals. They get a great draft as well. Drafted Marvin Harrison, a couple of edge rushers. They did what they needed to do. Moving on is the Indianapolis Colts. They had a pretty good but kind of average draft. Latu, I love that pick in the first round. But overall, I didn't really see them doing much as well. And finally, the New Orleans Saints. They get a great draft. I'm wondering, with the Spencer Rattler pick, if he is going to kind of come in and take some load off of Derek Carr and come in and ball out. But I love to see the Kool-Aid McKinstry pick as well. Great on them for drafting the defensive help that they needed, offensive linemen, and then, of course, Spencer Rattler as well. But, yeah, that is my grades for every team this coming year in the NFL Draft. Anyway, that's where I'm going to cut it loose for today's video. Of course, if you haven't already, drop a like, subscribe, turn that bell on. We try our best to post on this channel every single day. Not sure about tomorrow's video. We may take a look at the transfer portal tomorrow. I'm going to have to bring my iPad to school to kind of type on it a little bit. I'm in the car maybe, just to kind of get some notes down before we go over the transfer portal for college basketball and college football as well. But that's where I'm going to hop off, get this edited so you guys can watch it on time. Should be dropping around 4 o'clock or so in about an hour for me. So hopefully you guys won't have to wait too long for this video as well. Like I said, game day for the Bucks, game day for Spanish Fort High School. You guys are in the local area, come out, support us at Integrity Park, 6 or 7 o'clock tonight. Go Toros. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace.